What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and welcome to my Night Reign starter guide. So at this point, I have a bit over 30 hours played. I've managed to kill all the bosses except for one, which I'm saving for a tournament, and I've had a chance to go through on all the various characters, obviously. And I wanted to put together a guide to kind of share all the lessons I've learned as I've been playing the game. Just in terms of perspective, when I first started, runs were typically ending around level 10 or 11, which I felt like was moving pretty fast, and now runs end around level 14 or 15 if we have a good seed. So quite a difference, and there's a lot that goes into finding success in Night Reign, both in terms of being familiar with your character, understanding good team compositions, understanding routes you should take on the map. And so I wanted to put together a video that covers a majority of that content to help give those who are jumping in a head start. So the first thing we're going to do is just take a look at various locations in the Roundtable hold and explain them. A lot of this stuff is going to be more tutorial oriented for the first portion of this video, and then in the later half we're going to actually jump out on an expedition and kind of break down a typical run. But so expeditions is where we start them. Character selection is where you pick who you want to play. For a multiplayer queue up, you'll just pick your character in at like the start screen, so it's not as much a concern there. Change Garb are the various outfits you can unlock for your character. You end up purchasing those with the currency you see down in the bottom right. There's just a lot of cool different aesthetic outfits for your character. We're not going to show all those off right now because I do have some late game ones that are more spoilery. Relic Rights are where we put on the various relics that we get on runs and from defeating bosses. The visual Codex is where we're at right now. Has a ton of information. That's going to be one of the first things we dive into. Journal is where we start remembrances, which are personal side quests for each of the characters. We'll briefly talk about that a little bit later. Small Jar Bazaar, we can buy various items as well as relics. We'll also run by there. Garden, Shore, Waiting Room, and Crypt are basically just aesthetic areas. You may end up going there for remembrances, but otherwise they're just kind of cool zones to explore. And then the Sparring Ground at last is a area for you to practice a bunch of stuff, and we'll also talk about that. But the first thing I want to do is talk about the visual Codex. So on top of having a breakdown of like all of your wins and your playtime and whatnot, we also have a listing of all the characters as well as their abilities here. You can look at equipment, ranged weapons, shields, staves, talismans, tools. And the nice thing is we can actually see the scaling on different stuff here, which is good to help influence your choice on what you want to go with in terms of a weapon. Same thing for skills, sorceries, and incantations, just to get an idea of how much something costs, what it's going to be. Obviously, if you played Elden Ring, you're familiar with a lot of the stuff already. The guide has a bunch of really useful information, which we're going to be talking about some of that in a little bit, as well as the handbook, also having a bunch of useful information. And then lastly, we have the result history, which breaks down all of your recent runs, how things ended up going, whether it was a victory. What's really cool about this is you can see a full breakdown of the map, kind of like the route you took, how you went around the map. So that's really nice just to give an idea to like share stuff with various players. But to jump on into the characters, the first thing I'd like to do with this video is do a breakdown of each of the characters, recommendations based on their attributes, and kind of give you an idea on who you should play based on what you're looking for. So to start, we have Wylder. Wylder is very much the all-rounder. We have A in HP, B in stamina, A in strength, and B in dex. So we have a lot of flexibility for pretty much any weapon in the game. Obviously, FP and then our various casting-related stats are only at C, so he's not really good when it comes to like seals and staves, but pretty much any weapon you pick up, Wylder will be able to get the job done with. It does say preference for greatswords, but that doesn't mean you have to use greatswords. You could use claws, katanas, greatswords. I think colossal weapons work okay on him. He doesn't really have the poise that Raider has, so that's something to keep in mind. But just think of him as like a jack of all trades. Now, talking about our passives, skills, and arts, our passive ability is Sixth Sense, and this allows us to cheat death a single time. Now, it's not the case of like you die and instantly come back. While there is stuff like that in this game, this is more of a damage ignore mechanic. So if you're low on health, or even if you're not low, let's say you're at 50% health and you take a huge hit that would kill you otherwise, one time until you rest and get that back at a grace, you'll just ignore that attack. It'll be like it didn't happen, and you know your character somehow slipped past it, basically. So just keep that in mind. Like attacks that you think you'd be like, oh man, that should have killed me. Well, maybe it did kill you, and in fact your cheat death is what saved you. But this resets anytime you end up getting revived or anytime you end up passing through or resting at a site of grace. A very, very useful passive, especially if you're interested in solo play. It just gives you like that one little edge that might save you. Claw Shot allows you to yank in smaller enemies, sometimes will outright kill them. It also grapples you to larger enemies. A very solid mobility school. You can even just use it to move around the map, though we run so fast it's not really needed for that. And then lastly, we have the ultimate art, Onslaught Stake. And Onslaught Stake is incredibly powerful. It does a ton of stagger. We can charge this on up to boost the impact. And this is probably one of the more impactful ultimates just because of the raw damage and stagger output it uses. Probably the biggest thing to keep in mind is, especially if you're trying to maximize it and charge it, you really have to be aware of positioning, because nothing feels worse than charging up an Onslaught Stake and then a boss moves away and the entire attack misses. So very, very powerful ultimate. Just keep in mind that you want to make sure you have an open window when you're going to go for it. So who should be playing Wylder? Pretty much anybody. Wylder is a great all-rounder character. If you're just trying to jump in and get a feel for the game, you can't go wrong with him. You could have a team with 3 Wylders and you'll be fine. He is good in a variety of situations. There's never a bad time to have a Wylder. Moving on from there, we have Guardian. Now, Guardian is the frontline tank of the game. He is armed with a shield and a halberd. His preference is halberds, but you can really work with anything that's good behind a shield. So you could use something like hammers. You could use great spears. You could use thrusting swords. We have HP at S, stamina at A, and then strength and dex are at B and C. So he's decent with a variety of weapons. He's obviously not the best with things like heavy thrusting swords, but like Knight Rider's Glaive, for example, fantastic choice for him. And Guardian is very much the frontline tank of the party. He is there to help mitigate damage, help hold attention. He's not going to be all that impactful in terms of his damage output, but he can do a decent job, and he's also great at clearing trash thanks to some of his abilities. Now, first up, we have passive ability Steel Guard. The way this works is while you're blocking, you're going to want to pick a direction and press B, and then Guardian is going to plant his shield in the ground, and think of it like an empowered guard, like almost when you use barricade with a shield. So you have a huge amount of guard burst there. You can also do guard counters out of it very easily because you're going to use minimal stamina, but keep in mind that you're planted, so you're not able to turn very easily when you're in this stance. And if something just runs past you and hits you from behind, it's not going to be all that helpful, but it can be useful if you're trying to stop a particular ability that's coming in, and especially later on when you have relics that will draw aggro when you're guarding. Our character school, Whirlwind, this will cause a little whirlwind storm, kind of similar to the Asher Boar that's similar to that. Can knock out lightweight projectiles, but honestly, one of the best uses for this is going to be killing trash or grouping them on up. So you go into an area and there's like 5 or 6 smaller enemies and they're all coming from various angles. Pull out Whirlwind, yoinks them all up, makes them very easy to take out all at once. Very useful skill, low cooldown as well. Ultimate Art Wings of Salvation is very useful either as a defensive tool or a res tool. We can either jump up and then dive down. Does quite a lot of res in terms of people going down, but my favorite use for it is for the defensive aura. So basically when we use this, we then hold down the button and we will pin our weapon into the ground and create a defensive aura that's going to buff all teammates. So if there is a big special coming in from a boss and you don't think you're going to be able to avoid it, throwing out a Wings of Salvation and holding it and raising that protective aura could be the difference between life and death for you and your team. So who should be playing Guardian? Honestly, anyone that likes that tank fantasy. Keep in mind that your damage isn't going to really be all that high, especially compared to the rest of the cast. But when it comes to survivability, he is definitely the best with that SHP A stamina. Guardian's usually going to be one of the last ones to go down. Moving on from there, we have Ironeye, our ranged character. Now, Ironeye has a dexterity all the way up at A. Stamina and arcane are at B, and everything else is C or below. And so he can get in the fray with things like daggers or curved swords, but he's definitely best played at range. Very useful for getting up teammates who go down, since you can safely deal damage from afar and get the res on off. Has really nice abilities, which we'll talk about in a second. But Ironeye is a fantastic contribution to any team he's in. So first up, the passive, Eagle Eye. This just straight up increases item discovery for you and your entire team. Awesome passive, don't got to worry about it, don't got to think about it, just everyone gets better loot, which is always good. Our character skill is Marking. This is a directional input, so you can pick what direction you want to go, and you're basically going to slide forward and like clip a foe's ankle with your dagger. If you hit them, you're then going to mark them with a red X, and from that point forward, any damage that you deal to that target or anybody deals to that target is going to be 10% stronger, and eventually that mark will get destroyed, causing a large amount of stagger damage and a bit of a damage burst, kind of similar to how bleed or frostbite work if you're familiar with those. Marking is a fantastic skill. If you're playing Ironeye, I think the big difference between a good Ironeye and a mediocre Ironeye is marking. You want to keep mark up 100% of the time. As long as something is marked, you're going to see damage just keep pouring in, staggers pouring in. Phenomenal skill. Our ultimate art single shot is like a super One super powerful arrow, very, very large AoE, ignores defenses, goes through structures. And this is, in a sense, more of a utility or a wipe skill. It doesn't do a lot of single target impactful damage, so it's not all that huge against the boss. But if you're coming up on a camp and you fire one of these like straight through the middle of the camp, you might get 10-15 kills and rack up a bunch of free runes very quickly. It's also a fantastic res tool. If two teammates go down and you fire off a single shot, you might end up staggering the boss and resing your teammates at the same time. So very useful skill, tons of different uses for it between the res, the trash clear. Very, very nice. Just keep in mind that it's not going to be as impactful as, say, Onslaught Stake in terms of like, here we go, I'm firing my ultimate. You'll hit a boss with it and you'll be like, that wasn't that good. So keep in mind, in like a boss fight, this is probably going to be better saved for a res, or if you suddenly need a large amount of AoE for some reason. So who should be playing Ironeye? Honestly, anybody that likes that ranged fantasy. Keep in mind that he is best played at range. If you're playing your Ironeye and you're trying to get into the fray with melee, things probably aren't going to go all that well, just because your HP is only at C, so you don't really last all that well, but he can do a decent job in melee and really excels when he's played at range. Moving on from there, we have Duchess. Now, Duchess, despite being the Swift Dagger type class, actually scales best with intelligence, with A in intelligence, B in dex, and then B in FP and faith as well. So she's kind of like a melee cast hybrid, very much a spell sword, but she is a very evasive class and one that I think where we really start to see the skill ceiling with characters. So our passive ability, Magnificent Poise, this allows us to do consecutive dodges and basically have an extension of iframes. So if there's like big AoEs coming out, you can do this like a dodge and then into a backflip, and you'll have extended iframes, avoiding the whole thing. So she's very nimble, she's very quick. Our character skill, Restage, this is one of the strongest character skills in the game, probably the strongest. But the way Restage works is when you do it, it's going to replicate all the damage that you and your teammates have done over the last couple seconds, and it's going to do 50% of that damage in a burst to the target. So if you and your teammates all line up ultimates and suddenly you pump out 1,000 damage and then you hit Restage, you're going to do another 500 damage on top of what you just did. On top of that, this can also replicate status effects. So if you're doing like poison buildup or bleed buildup and then you restage, those effects are also going to be reapplied. So it's really good for keeping statuses up. And I think the use of Restage is really going to be what separates basically an okay Duchess from a great Duchess, because you don't want to sit on it too long and get stuck waiting for like the perfect time to use it. And it definitely takes some practice to feel out like, okay, did we do enough damage here to pop the Restage? It has a relatively low cooldown, so you do want to use it fairly frequently, but you don't just want to randomly spam it. You want to make sure that you're maximizing it around good damage burst windows, and when you see your team doing good damage, not just you getting in a couple hits. Lastly, we have our Ultimate Art Finale, which obscures the self and allies from foes. You can kind of use this offensively, but the times where you would, most enemies are going to see through it. So if you're using it offensively, the best case would be like, hey, we're doing a camp. Let me pop this. We'll go in. Each person take out one of the little guys at the camp when we clear it out real fast. In boss fights, I think this is best used as a res tool in the sense that you can pop it and then go on over and res a teammate while the boss will ignore you. But not a whole lot of offensive application in boss fights, because most larger bosses, if you try to pop this and you're like, let's just attack them while invisible, you're going to get bonked anyway. And who should be playing Duchess? Honestly, anybody who likes that spell sword type feel, anybody who likes the feel of, the mobility, being able to dodge in and out. She is very much a hit and run type character, though. Keep in mind, we don't have a ton of stamina. We don't have a ton of health. And so she's not really going to be able to like stay in the fight and trade blows. The opposite of Duchess, of course, is the Raider, probably my favorite character in the lineup, coming in with A in health, A in stamina, and S in strength. This character is the personification of Unga Bunga. He has a ton of poise. He is strength build personified. He's fantastic. Taking a look at our passive ability, Fighter's Resolve, taking damage boosts Retaliate's potency, and you cannot be knocked down while you are using it. You remain standing with a sliver of HP even after taking heavy damage. And so we have a lot of poise that is baked into his kit, but mainly surrounding Retaliate. Now, the way Retaliate works is we basically do like a Horaloo combo, and typically it'll be 2 hits. It'll do a fair amount of posture damage, but if you have taken enough damage via Fighter's Resolve, or you time Retaliate to where a hit is going to come into contact with you mid-retaliate, you end up doing a third portion, which will be very strong, and it will usually stagger pretty much anything. Like, you're knocking down dragons with this, you're knocking down golems with this, doesn't matter how big it is. And so the best way to use retaliate is honestly when you see a big attack coming, you start retaliate, you're going to do one stomp, you're going to get hit in the face and not care, you're going to do a second stomp, and then you're going to headbutt somebody into the next dimension, knock them on their ass, and your team dogpiles them. Very fun character skill to use, incredibly satisfying because of the hyper armor it grants. Lastly, we have our ultimate art, Totem Stella. Now, Totem Stella is going to create a giant gravestone or tombstone right in front of you. It is a very large AoE, does pretty respectable damage, and then on top of that, it's going to buff the entire team. So this is a very useful ultimate art for starting things off. Like if you are initiating a boss, I would open with Totem Stella, and then Wylder could follow up with the onslaught stake, and then Duchess would pop a restage so that we are getting the damage from both the totem and the totem as well as the onslaught stake that is getting restaged as well. But very useful ultimate. You can use it to res, you can use it to capture enemies in your tombstone. Everyone's been calling it the Pokeball in the review test. They're like, I got him, he's stuck in the Pokeball, and people will heal up or rebuff or whatever the case is. But very useful ultimate art. I will say that even though it can be climbed, climbing is a little bit wonky at the moment, so I wouldn't use that as the main usage of it, but you can use it to pop it on up and then block certain projectiles, which can be nice. Moving down the list, we have Revenant. Now, Revenant is definitely one of the more unique characters to use. Our passive ability is Necromancy. Raise enemy ghosts to fight as allies. Ghosts are summoned to fight, but are fleeting and dissipate after some time. And the basic idea here is anytime Revenant gets a killing blow, there's a chance that you'll raise that enemy back up as a phantom briefly to assist in the fight. So this is mainly going to be useful as you're clearing out camps. Obviously has very limited application in boss fights, but regardless, pretty cool passive and one that makes her a very interesting character to play. Our character skill is Summon Spirit. Basically, when we pull up this character skill, we get a little menu, and we have 3 different spirits we can choose from. We have a page, a pumpkin head, and a giant skeleton. And so depending on which one you go ahead and pull on out will determine what they're useful for. Helen the page, I think, is really useful in close quarters. She's also fantastic at getting reses. So if somebody goes down, I might run by, throw out Helen, and then keep running to distract the boss while Helen sits there and pokes my teammate to get him back up. Frederick is the Pumpkinhead. I think Frederick is probably the best all-rounder, does respectable stagger damage, can serve as a decent tank, and you really can't go wrong with Frederick. And then lastly, you have Sebastian, which is our big giant skeleton. Now, when you pop her ultimate art, they will also activate whatever their special is. So Helen, it's going to be a rapier combo. Frederick does a little spin to win, and then Sebastian does a ghost flame beam. So keep that in mind, but that's not really the main thing you want to be using your ultimate art for. We'll talk about that more in a second. But in general, the gist here is you really got to think about what spirit you want to use when. You can freely swap between them. Only one can be out at a time, but Helen is really good for getting some quick damage in or getting reses. Frederick, a fantastic all-rounder. And then if we're trying to fight off a bunch of trash, that's usually when I'm going to pull Sebastian out, whether I need a big tank or there's a bunch of enemies. Now, our ultimate art, Immortal March, will make you and nearby allies immortal. And what it means by immortal is that you can be reduced to 1 health, but you will not die. So keep this in mind. You know, when it runs out, if you're stuck at 1 health and you get hit, obviously that's going to suck. So it's definitely a little bit iffy and something you need to be aware of when you use it. But if things are kind of coming down to the wire, you can pop this. Everyone ends up having that immortality for a short duration. You can also use it to revive people that have fallen down. When you use that ultimate art, your summoned spirit also becomes immortal. And one of the things it also does, which is enlisted, is it prevents all status buildup while active. So if you're in an area where Deathblight is a concern, or Madness is a concern, or Rot is a concern, you can pop your Immortal March right before that status would proc, and then it's just going to start falling off. So it gives you a nice window to pump damage without worrying about that status. Now, in terms of the stats for Revenant, we are S scaling in Faith, A in FP, and then B in Int and Arcane. So she's very much a mage type class with only C strength dex and then D HP and stamina. Very less than ideal getting in the fray and having to fight with her. It should be a last resort. And one of the big things to keep in mind here is Revenant doesn't have any way to restore her own FP. So as you're playing as Revenant, you want to look for things like shields that restore FP on block, or relics that are going to restore FP as you block, or weapons that restore FP as you deal damage. Like a bow that restores FP per hit would be awesome. But for the most part, to maximize her potential, you really want to be seeking out seals. You want to be getting out seals, lightning seals, frenzy flame seals, dragon seals, all that stuff to allow her to really pump damage while your summons take care of most of the work. Now, who wants to play Revenant? Revenant, honestly, is more of a challenging class to play. I know you're probably thinking like, oh, summons, easy mode, but like your summons, it's not like you have 3 mimic tiers or anything. Like they can be decent, but they are situational. And so it definitely takes a lot of practice to play Revenant well, especially when you consider the lower HP and stamina that you have compared to other classes. Moving down from there to what I would consider probably the most challenging class in the game is the Recluse. Now, the Recluse is a full-on mage. We have S intelligence, we have S faith. When it comes to casting, Recluse is unmatched. She is going to pump big damage. Now, her passive ability is Elemental Defense. Discover affinity residues that can be recollected to replenish FP. Affinity attacks create affinity residues. Residues appear on allies as well, which can be collected. So the basic idea is anytime elemental damage is done, whether it's through a spell or a weapon with element, like if someone has a fire sword and they hit an enemy, there's going to be a fire residue on that enemy. If I hit the enemy with a lightning spell, there's going to be a lightning residue on that enemy. If we're fighting a, tree sentinel and it hits somebody, there might be a holy residue on them. And so anytime I look at somebody, I can then use Magic Cocktail to yoink that elemental affinity out of the target, whether it's a teammate or an enemy. I can collect up to 3. And when I have 3, I can then execute the Magic Cocktail. So in a sense, this is kind of like Invoker, if you've ever played Dota. The idea here is I want to collect the various affinities and put them into combinations to create unique spells. And there's a lot of really cool spells. There's one that's going to encase me in ice and almost guarantee frostbite. There's one that's a little bit slower, but it does a giant lightning stake, does a ton of damage. There is a gravity-based explosion. There's like a huge cone of flame that can deal damage to enemies and also heal allies. There's stuff that can remove status. There's stuff that can increase defense. There's stuff that gives you a auto parry shield. There are a ton of crazy spells. But this, I think, is what makes Recluse one of the hardest characters to play, because not only do you want to make sure that you have a variety of seals and staves so you can get these various elemental residues on targets and pull the different colors that you need, but you need to keep in mind that if like your teammates are all running fire weapons for some reason, and you're like, okay, I need to get a magic residue, and you hit them with a spell and you go to pull the residue off, if your teammate slaps them with a magic weapon beforehand, you might end up getting a fire weapon. You'll end up getting a fire residue instead. And you can visually see that, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. So you need to be aware of what residues you're pulling, what residues you can create, what residues your teammates can create, what residues your enemies can create, and then what all these different residues do in terms of each spell. So there's a lot that goes into this character, but she is a lot of fun to play once you get it down. As for our ultimate art, Soul Blood Song, this basically is going to brand nearby enemies with blood sigils, and while they're branded, any damage that is dealt to them is going to restore both HP and FP. Now, this can be an incredibly strong ultimate art because in a sense, it just gives you a ton of sustain. But keep in mind, because you need to hit the target to pull this off, the best time to use this is going to be when you get a big damage opportunity, when a boss is phase transitioning, when a boss is staggered. Basically, when there is a window where the boss isn't sprinting all over the place, pop Soul Blood Song, boom, your team is self-sustaining, healing, restoring FP, and pumping big damage. Very strong ultimate art when used correctly. And then lastly, we have, well, and who should play Recluse? Honestly, anybody who has that spell fantasy. Recluse is absolutely goated when you get down her spells, but we'll talk more about those in a second section coming up. Next, we have Executor. Now, Executor is the katana boy of the game. We have Dexterity at S, Arcane at S, and this is also a very high skill ceiling character, and that's because to really play Executor at his best, you need to be a goated Sekiro player, which I'll talk about in a second. So Tenacity, receive boost after recovering from status ailments, which boosts your attack and stamina recovery speed. This one you don't really need to think about. The idea is if you get frostbitten or poisoned when it resolves, you're just getting boosted. This is something that's more just going to happen in the background. You know, I wouldn't worry about carrying like a bunch of boluses or anything to cure statuses, but it is just a nice little perk that when it goes off, it's nice to see. Now, our character skill is Cursed Sword. When we do this, we pull out a special katana, and while that katana is out, we are quite literally Wolf or Sekiro. Every time we tap L1, we do a Sekiro parry. You can parry pretty much anything that's not like a giant spell attack or a grab. As we continue to deflect, we're going to charge up our blade, at which point we could hit the left trigger on our controller to do like a special attack, which is going to do a lot of stagger. But Cursed Sword is incredibly powerful. I had one match where a Morgott spawned on me, and I sat there and just parried him. I basically played Sekiro versus Morgott and got him down to like 25% on my own, at which point my team showed up. But so in the right hands and someone with the right skill level, Executor is absolutely crazy because he can be a pseudo tank with his parry potential. He can hold off enemies. Anytime he gets a chance for that 1v1, he is an insane character, and it feels so satisfying when you pull it off. Now, on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, we have her ultimate art, Aspects of the Crucible Beast, which assumes the form of a primordial beast and allows us to just basically smash stuff. So when you're in beast form, you have light attacks and heavy attacks. And then when you use the left trigger, you will do your ultimate finisher, which is like the big claw attack that some Crucible Knights do. If you use that early, it will end your ultimate art. And this one, it's kind of weird, you know, because we're like super skill-based cursed sword, and then your ultimate art is like, okay, just mash your buttons and smash stuff. But it can be really useful for clearing out lots of enemies, since he's more of a one-on-one character. Aspect of the Crucible Beast really gives you a chance to do lots of AoE damage and clear a bunch of enemies out in an environment. It also provides a full heal when you activate it, so if you're on the verge of death, you can pop the ultimate and then you'll get a full heal, and then you'll fight in beast form for a little bit. But keep in mind, you can still die in beast form, so something to keep in mind. If you're focused on dodging and you pop that as the heal and then you're fighting something you really need to focus dodging, you might not be able to. But you can, of course, just immediately hit L2, do the finisher, come out of it, and then you'll have your full health as Executor. So who should be playing as Executor? Honestly, anyone that has a parry fantasy. This character is going to be fantastic with anything that is Dex and Arcane. So things like claws, things like katanas, things like curved swords. You really want to lean into that Arcane. So, you know, stuff like poison, stuff like bleed, stuff like rot. He is going to be very, very good at applying status effects. And so that covers all of our characters. Now that you know the characters, this is kind of where the equipment comes in, because if you look at a character, okay, S scaling Dex, S scaling Arcane, I could then go to equipment, and over here I can see what the scaling is. Like, oh, well, that's D in Dexterity. Oh, that's D in Dexterity. That's D in Dexterity. Oh, that's D Dexterity, and it has Rot. That would be great for him. And so this is where you want to look at your various melee weapons and get an idea of what you should prioritize based on your character's scaling. As for your spells, this is more informational. This was all the same stuff in Elden Ring, so this more just tells you like, hey, you can activate and do a follow-up on this ability, or hey, this costs this much to activate and then the follow-up costs this much. Talking about the guide, the one thing I want to talk about the guide, and I would recommend you read through all of this stuff, but what I want to talk about in particular are these map key locations. So when you pull up the map, we can end up pressing Y to bring up the detailed view, which I do 100% of the time. And I want to talk about the key locations here, because this is important for guiding your runs. So first up, we have forts. Forts are typically going to have a boss up at the top. There's also going to be a map, which will reveal hidden things nearby. Sometimes it's treasure chests. Sometimes it's shiny beetles. Forts are almost always worth it. Great churches usually have a pretty straightforward boss, and they're good for sacred seals. So if you need seals, that's the place to go. Encampments are usually garrisons. Sometimes they'll be more straightforward. It'll be easy stuff like the fire chariots. Sometimes it's like Red Mane Knights. So encampments are a little bit hit or miss. You will frequently find merchants outside of encampments though, so that's one thing to keep in mind. But I would consider encampments low priority for the most part. Unless you find like the right encampment, I feel like they usually take too much time for how many runes you're going to get out of them. Ruins are usually pretty straightforward. There's typically chests in the underground chambers, but you usually can jump into a ruin, run right up towards the end of it, and kill the boss to get a quick upgrade. So they are great for just fast runes. Tunnel entrances. In tunnels, you will always find a boss which will have a smithing stone, which can get your weapon up to purple quality, assuming it's already blue. Depending on which tunnels. Some tunnels are really fast. Like I know the southern tunnel on most maps, I can sprint right in, kill the troll, get my stuff, and I'm in and out in like 3 minutes. There's another tunnel that has Pumpkinhead, and then there's another that has like a bunch of winding areas that I still haven't taken the time to fully explore. But if you're trying to upgrade a weapon, tunnels are your friends. Castles are usually much bigger, and the castle is typically in the center of the map. Great place to farm up a butt ton of runes. You could very easily go from like level 5 all the way up to level 10 in a castle. But it's really going to depend on what has spawned. If it is full of trolls throwing pots, it can be pretty annoying. It's full of the Crucible Knights. I think those are much more valuable, so it just depends what is spawning in the castle at the time. But I wouldn't recommend tackling a castle before level 5. Field bosses range all the way from things like Loretta all the way up to dragons and gargoyles. Depending on the size of the field boss will determine the reward. If it's something like a gargoyle, you're usually going to get a legendary reward. If it's something smaller like a hippo, you're usually going to get a basic reward. So keep in mind what the field boss is. Field bosses are not created equally. They're usually a great source of runes, but something like a gargoyle or a full-size dragon, you're probably going to want to be around level 10 or higher to fight. Whereas if it's something like a hippo or a red wolf of Radagon, you could probably take that out closer to like 5 to 7. Everjails you need keys for. Everjails can have a variety of components. After an Everjail, you're usually going to get access to a perk and then either a flat amount of 10, 20, or 30,000 runes, depending on the quality of enemy that came out of the Everjail. But they're usually just a fast hit and go. So if you find stone sword keys, definitely make sure to take out the Everjails. Lastly, we have townships. Now, townships are a lot more rare, I find, but they are definitely worth swinging by. If you see a township, there's usually a merchant, and it has usually really, really good goods. We're talking about like crazy good talismans, crazy good weapons. If you see a township and you got runes to spare, it's worth swinging by just to see what the merchant is offering. Even if you don't have runes, just swing by and be like, all right, what does he have? Great, I need 50,000. We're coming back here later. Churches are where we upgrade our flasks. You should always try to hit the churches on your runs. I see too many people back from the beta that were ignoring churches, whether it's night 1 or night 2. You should always try and have a path that is going to allow you to hit churches as you play. And then lastly, we have Sorcerer's Rises. These are quick and dirty if you can find the cipher. The cipher comes in a variety of ways. Sometimes it's down in a plant. Sometimes it's a tree that runs away. Sometimes it's a glyph up on a wall that you have to hit. But once you break the glyph, you can run up into the rise, get staves, and usually get a free passive upgrade. And so knowing what each of these are and what you're looking for is very important. Also, our Spectral Hawk tree, when we look at those on the map, we can see the route that the Spectral Hawk is going to go. It's kind of like a brushstroke line that we'll see. So keep that in mind when you're running to a Spectral Hawk tree. And then Spirit Streams are also fantastic just for map mobility. Some other stuff, obviously, the scarabs, buried treasures. If you see that icon, it's a specific mission objective. And then we have breakdowns of all this stuff. Merchants and smithing tables, weapon racks with bows, staves, sacred steels, hitting info, sacred flasks, all this stuff we can see. And then when you're in a tunnel, you can also press down to pull up a map of the tunnel if you're getting lost. Going down to the handbook, the one thing I really want to point out at the handbook, while there is a bunch of stuff here you should read through, in particular, if you're playing Recluse, we have a full breakdown of her magic combos. So pure magic, fire, lightning, and holy. The double combos, this could be magic, magic, fire, or fire, fire, magic. Basically, you always execute your magic cocktail with 3, and depending on the combination of those 3 determines your spells. In terms of key spells to look out for, Fire and Holy is super, super nice. It's going to raise max HP, reduce status, ailment gauge buildup, and lower max HP of nearby enemies. Love that one. Lightning and Holy allows you to auto parry attacks, which is super cracked. Fire, Lightning, and Holy is the giant lightning slam I talked about. Magic, Lightning, and Holy is the cold storm that I talked about. And I'd say those are probably my favorite. Magic, Fire, and Holy can be pretty nice, but it's a bit of a long animation to do that breath. And then Magic, Fire, and Lightning, that's more for AoE clear because of the gravity. But even though it says heavy damage, I don't think it's comparable to the damage we're getting out of the bottom 2. But this is one of those things you're just going to have to practice with spells and see what you like. So moving on from there, God, man, 30 minutes already. Moving on from there over to the journal. As I mentioned, this is where you would go and do a remembrance. If I click resume remembrance, that is going to be the quest that I get from Wylder, just to show these 2 locations, how to get to them really fast besides fast traveling. So obviously here's the Roundtable hold. If we go this way, we get to our book that has all of our notes. Instead, we take the other turn over this way. We get to the journal, which is where we do our side quests. Another thing is Shifting Earth. I think I have one active right now. Actually, see. You're going to see boss names in a second, but yeah, so I can see Shifting Earth underway, Naklateo, the Shrouded City. Shifting Earth are like environmental effects, which will change a portion of the map. If you can complete the Shifting Earth events, they're usually worth a ton of runes as well as crazy, crazy rewards. If for some reason you don't want to do the Shifting Earth, you can always come to this bed over here and pass time. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I think Shifting Earth is phenomenal. Like, I'd much rather do a run that has Shifting Earth available than one that doesn't. So that's definitely something that I want to point out and have people keep in mind. Lastly, going over to the sparring grounds, just to talk about this place briefly. While we're here, we can change our level, we can change HP, ultimate arts, consumables, all that stuff. If you go over into these chests, you can pick up any armaments you want, test stuff out, see how it works with your character. We have 3 testing dummies right here that we can test out. And then over here, we can walk up to this guy, and then we can animate him to actually have like a training buddy. So if you want to, you know, practice parrying attacks or whatever the case is, you can come over there and get a feel for it, which I would recommend coming over here at the very least with Executor and practicing his parries if you want to play him, just to get a feel for how that sword works. So we are going to jump into a single player real fast. And the very last thing I want to do in this guide is just do like a speedy breakdown of how I would navigate through a map, just to give an idea of how a run might go. We're not going to do a full run, obviously, because we're already coming up close to 40 minutes on this guide, but just to give an idea. So first thing I'm doing is I'm pulling up the map and seeing where I am at as I'm landing. Right here, I can see there's already a church behind me. So as soon as it's going to let me, I'm going to get off my hawk, and I'm going to want to get that church that's right back there. So I'm going to mark that. Now, immediately upon landing, it's pretty much always going to put you next to a basic camp. These basic camps aren't on the map, but they're usually going to have just a couple enemies, and the reason to sprint on into the basic camp is just to get yourself some starter levels. You know, the whole point of coming here is just we want to get enough runes that we can get our first level. Because at level 1, you are very vulnerable. So we got our level. We're going to sprint through. Break anything. I'll hit the chests. Kill anybody that's left. And then I'll take a brief second and look for loot. So I just decide, like, don't want an S stock. Any consumables, throwing daggers, fire grease, nothing I really want there. Don't want a dagger. So at this point, the camp will be done. The next priority would be immediately finding a grace. Get our level 2, and then we're booking it. Now, I could kill that guy, but a big thing to keep in mind as you're playing Night Reign is time is always counting against you. And so you really want to maximize all your time. So being that I have a thing right over here, you know, I'm this close to a church, I'm going to grab it real fast. And then after that, I would probably swing into the mine, since I'm right next to the mine as well. That's just going to be high value. But the big thing is kind of like always keeping in mind what your route is. So we got that. Don't really need those, but I'll pick them up. Pickled turtleneck at Warming Storm. Ooh, that is useful. So I'm going to run this way next. I have a stone sword key to start. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do that stone sword. Take a look at it. I don't have a luff for level 2 right now, so that may not be worth it, but it just depends what comes out of the thing. Just keep in mind, I also don't have my ultimate up right now. But it's right here, so I'm going to go ahead and pop this. Just see what's inside of it. If it's something that's particularly big, Grave Warden Duelist, I could probably go ahead and take that down. Keep in mind, when you're doing ultimates, you're going to be completely immune. I'm going to grab 10,000 runes because it's early. Since we killed him, we got that. That's a level 4. And I can see that right here, I got a mine. And so right now, this is a very clean opening for a solo run. Dropping straight on down. Definitely takes a little bit of time to kind of learn the various mine routes. This one is the southern mine, at least you usually enter, and then you can go straight to the right. And you'll usually find your troll. I already popped my ultimate, so I won't have that up, which is a little unfortunate, but we'll be okay. And there's obviously tons of stuff in the mine, but typically, because time is of the essence, I'm usually prioritizing. So it is very fast paced, very much, you know, turbo mode. So I am running in as fast as I can, trying to get a stagger. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a very good weapon yet, and I don't have status effects, so this is taking longer than I would typically like. But that's what we get the staggers for. Alright, Night Tide's coming in, so we're gonna finish this guy off. I usually have at least a couple seconds before it's gonna get here, so I'm gonna finish him off. Alright, I can see that I am not going to be in the circle, so I'm gonna grab my smithing stone. I'm gonna run in here. See if there is anything I want. Exalted Flesh is good. Regular smithing stone, I'll take. Take a turtleneck. Noble Slender Sword with Ground Slam. Don't really want that. Okay. And so now I can see that the blue is coming in. So what I want to do is I'm going to pop out over here. So I can run this way and exit on out. And since my first night is coming to an end, now I need to figure out where I want to go from here. So let's take a moment and kind of think about how this run is going. We're already up to level 4. I can see a little arrow up in the top left. So that means I'm at level 5. I'm still very early. I'm only halfway through my first night, so I could potentially get up to 7 or 8. I can see there's a grace right here. I'm going to go ahead and hit that. Level on up. This usually spawns a dragon. We're going to trigger that just to get some free runes. Yep, there's the dragon. We're not going to fight that right now, obviously. I'm just getting it to kill those guys. Dragon's going to cost death and get some runes for me. And I'm actually going to make my way over here. It's going to be in the circle, so that's a safe spot to go. With the Shifting Earth event, that's what we have right now, so that's what the city is over here. Shifting Earth events, I tend to like to try and tackle those on Earth 2, or Night 2, so I'm not really all that concerned about it. And we're not going to do a full run here, but I do kind of want to just run through and give an idea of my progress. So right now, we know that this remainder of the circle is going to be in the night. Other things that I'd like to hit, there's a church way over there. I can't get that right now, obviously. But what I could do is hit this up, and then I could hit that church, and then potentially go there. And so what we're really doing is we're looking to kind of maximize our run through. So like there's a Loretta over here. Could potentially tackle that, but level 5 is a little bit iffy. I'd much rather be at like level 7 to try and fight a Loretta. And some of that is just going to be experience, just kind of feeling stuff out, knowing when to go after certain enemies. So going into these ruins, once we know what type of... So this is... Okay, this is a golem type ruins. So there's usually seals up top that we could climb up and get. But these I can just usually focus the Guardian Golem. Killed the golem, forked greatsword, sure. Anytime you kill a boss enemy, it's going to create a grace. So if you can, hit it to level. Otherwise, just keep running. 112. I'm going to toss that out. We'll use that with Storm Stop. It's a solid weapon. And then the church is up top. So we're running on over to the blue thing here. And I might, honestly, with this long, I might as well just finish the first night. I'm not going to finish the full run, but... So we are in the church. Anything useful? I usually look for pickled foulfoots if they're around. So I want to go over here. If I hit Y, I can see there are going to be merchant as well as bows over here. The big thing I'm looking forward towards is the merchant. We got the fourth greatsword. I have the thing to upgrade it. You can see we have the red or the fire chariots. So this is a pretty easy camp to clear. The merchant for this camp is usually on the inside, but we will run in and try to take out the merchants real fast. Not the merchants, the take these things out. So the first flame chariot is down. I like to kill them near these guys because they're usually going to blow them up for some extra runes. Another one right here. And then there's one more, it's over there. Merchant's also over this way. We're going to go ahead and, well, before I buy that, let me just see. Fire Omen Cleaver, Envoy's Horn, I would like, but I don't have the runes for that. Shit, I would need to... I might come back and buy that later. For now, I'll just upgrade my 4th Greatsword. You can never go wrong with bleed. See, he blew up. What do we got here? Rivers of Blood. Yeah, you can't go wrong with more runes, and I kind of like the sword I already got. So now, looking at time and where we're at, I could either go Poison Camp, I could go up north. I'd probably try and go up north since there's a Spirit Spring I can hit that's going to help launch me up there. It just depends what's that camp. If it's more Flame Chariots, I'll get it no issue. If it's not, things will be a little bit harder. I don't know if that actually got me higher or not. You can see how it's just go, go, go. Like there's no downtime. If I'm taking more than 15 seconds to consider something, it's a waste of my time. We got another Flame Chariot camp. These are pretty easy, so I'm going to try and beeline through this, kill the Flame Chariots. Looking at the map, I can see the closing spot is over there, which is quite unfortunate. I might be able to get this. Nope, I can't. It's already too late. So instead, now we gotta run. We gotta run. Now, looking at here, this is where I would decide, okay, what can I still do with the time I have given? You know, I know that the camp is going into there. I've already cleared that. The mine isn't really worth entering from that angle. I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to do that. And since I don't have time to do any of this stuff, the next best thing to do is honestly going to be just killing what I can. Just anything that looks like I can take it out. Even enemies that are worth crap for runes, I'm going to take them on out. Because I have a limited amount of time left. I'm going to constantly make my way over towards that. We got a Grace over there. I obviously want to make sure to pay a visit to the Grace. But the point is, there's no major areas that I can hit that are still within zone for me. You can hear a shiny. If I had been a little bit faster, I might have been able to hit that, but no time. Check the merchant. Would still buy it, but no, I'd rather heal up. I'd rather spend it on a level. Typically night 1, like level 5 is the minimum. Ideally, like a perfect run, I'd be like level 8 by the end of it. We're not doing too bad, considering I don't usually do solo runs. The blue is coming in, so like I said, we're just... anything I can kill in the time I have. That's what we're looking to do right now. Because I don't have enough time to do a major objective, so anything else I do right now, it's just runes. And it's not a ton of runes, obviously. You know, we're not getting anything crazy out of this. But runes are runes. And I have seen instances where I get to the final boss and it's like, yo, I'm 1,000 short of leveling up. You gotta be kidding me. And so that's why we are really looking to absolutely maximize every moment we have in a run. I don't want any downtime. So as it encloses on in, it's going to spawn some pre-boss type enemies. Oh, God. I don't know how bro avoided me there. These enemies are usually on a timer, so if you take too long killing them, eventually whatever the boss is will spawn. This will probably be demi-humans, based on what we're fighting. I'm going to toss down a warming stone. Charge this up. Big damage. There's my cheat dice. See how that went off there? Oh my god. Damn, get off my ass, bro. There we go. Demi-human's dead. I'm going to pick my reward here. Activation, someone's with lost. Guard counters, sure. Never take gradual flask restoration. And so now night 2 begins. So this is where the first thing I want to do is plan out my route. Now, there is a church. That church is really far. I'd spend a lot of time going for it. So instead, what I'd probably do is make my way into the city. And even though I'm going to take damage from the circle, I'm actually going to start moving now. And the reason for that being that even though we're already moving, and you're like, well, it seems like a lot of unnecessary damage to take. Well, all I got to do is just drive by any grace that exists, and I'll heal on up. So I could zip on into the city, hit the very first grace I see, level up. That's going to heal me on up, and then I'd continue going. And from here, just because it's a fresh night 2, I would, or even I could try and take down the boss. I don't know if I could kill Loretta right now. We could do a drive-by on Loretta and see what it looks like. Oh, if you find these out in the world, usually those have really good stuff. Heart bow, grab it. Gold pickled is always worth it. Let's see what kind of damage we're doing to Loretta. Doable, but so with damage like that, I'd rather fight her after I get done the city. Simply because, like, could I kill it? Yes. But is it worth the time it's going to take to kill it? Right now, probably not. And I think that's the thing that's going to take the most practice, is knowing, you know, when is it worth fighting something versus when you should just move on and come back to it later. Because keep in mind, it's not whether or not you can beat something, it's whether or not it's worth the time it's going to take to beat something. And that's honestly the thing that's going to that's the thing that's going to take the most practice, is knowing, like, all right, I'm at a level to take this out. I should do this now versus no. Like, if this is taking longer than 30 seconds, I got to go. And, you know, that's what solo's for. But it definitely takes practice to get a feel for it. So, closing thoughts. Oh, God, I completely forgot to talk about the relics. Got so caught up on, like, talking to characters and showing a run and everything. So going on over here, this is where we perform Relic Rights. Now, at Relic Rights, we have different goblets that we can choose, and that's going to dictate what color we can put on. So, like, this is yellow, green, green. This is red, red, blue. In some cases, you'll have some that are, like here, he has one that's a wild card. So that's red, red, and then any color I want. But as you find various relics, you put these on. These are going to have a variety of different effects. We can add certain relics over to favorites. On top of that, we can sort through, like, hey, I only want to see large relics, so I know, like, you know, what are my best ones to put on. Which, to be honest, most of the time you're probably going to sell anything that's small. Honestly, you can just sell for the most part. I really hope that at some point they add, like, a fusion, like, let me yank that off and put it onto a bigger relic, but unfortunately there's nothing like that for now. So anything that is small, all we got is here. We go here and then we just sell them all. So, wow, I got so many. You gonna sell it or what? Mediums, there's a couple mediums that are good, so I don't want to completely sell my mediums, but Once I get enough larges, I'll end up also selling all of these as well. But yeah, there's no like fusion or breakdown systems or anything like that for the time being. So you sell those, and then the last thing, of course, is coming on over here. We can see the various garbs, including the Dark Souls 2 drip. Let's go, baby. That's what I'm talking about. That's right. Farum Knight up in the house. And you're going to unlock these as you play, as you do the character remembrance quests. Well, actually, let me just break it down. So I don't have his remembrance done, but you have 3 that are basic. So Wylder, alternate Wylder, more expensive alternate Wylder. And then you're going to unlock 2 after you beat the final boss. In his case, you get Artorias and Lion Knight. And then there's going to be another one that you would unlock by completing his remembrance, and that one you get for free. So a couple different skins for your characters to choose from, so you can maximize your drip as you play. But other than that, I think we covered pretty much everything. Anything I didn't cover, obviously I mentioned it, but Visual Codex, go in, read everything in the Visual Codex. I cannot stress enough how useful the information there is. And then really keep in mind the sparring grounds, man. If you're trying to get a feel for the spells with Recluse, go there and practice them. If you're trying to get a feel for Executor's parries, go there and practice them. Do not sleep on the sparring grounds. And the last piece of advice, honestly, play this game with friends. Like, solo is doable with certain characters. I think Executor, Raider, Wylder does very well solo. Ironeye can do kind of well solo, but the casted characters I think are very struggly trying to play the game solo for sure. And honestly, playing with randoms isn't much better. But playing this with friends where you're coordinating and you're like, hey, I got a bow, do you want this bow? Like, that is really what makes this shine. The runs I've had with people where I've been on comms and we're communicating and we're sharing loot have by far been the best and the most fun runs that I've had. So if you're struggling, get some buddies, get together, and go smash some bosses. But either way, that is going to wrap this one up. Definitely one of the longer guides, but I mean, there's just so, it's like trying to teach somebody Elden Ring in under an hour, you know? So closing this one out here. I don't know if I'm going to do like individual character guides, just because it is very RNG, and you know, it just depends what you're finding on a particular run. I do have a couple of really good runs that I've been getting with various other creators. I'll probably be uploading those. But otherwise, wrapping things up here for now, and I'll catch you later.